It's maybe the most famous disaster in all of history, but I'm willing to bet the story you think you know is missing the most important piece of the puzzle. You see, it wasn't just an iceberg that sank the Titanic. We're going to uncover the fatal flaw, the one hidden deep inside its supposedly genius design that actually doomed the ship from the very first moment of impact. So picture this. The night is freezing cold, perfectly clear, and starlit. Then, out of the darkness, a shadow looms. The warning bell rings out 3 times, but it is way too late. And the impact? Well, it's not some loud, dramatic crash you see in the movies. For most people on board, it's just a slight shudder, a dull, grinding whisper of steel scraping against ancient ice. And this was what everyone believed. It was more than a marketing slogan. It had become an undeniable fact in the public's mind. On the ship, most passengers don't even wake up. And why would they? They were on the most advanced, the most luxurious, and, supposedly, the safest ship ever built. The irony, of course, is just staggering. As they slept, their unsinkable ship was already dying. That quiet, almost unnoticeable grind of steel on ice, well, that's what set a catastrophic chain reaction into motion. To really get why this happened, you have to look at what was supposed to keep the ship afloat in the first place. Because the Titanic's revolutionary design, the very thing that made it seem so invincible, was also, tragically, its greatest weakness. So the ship was built with 16 of these so-called watertight compartments. I mean, it was an incredible feat of engineering, all designed to contain a breach. The thinking was that the ship could stay afloat with any 2 compartments completely full of water. It could even survive the first 4 in a row flooding. A disaster on that scale was thought to be literally impossible. But here it is. This is the fatal flaw. And what's so great about this slide is the comparison. You see, real watertight seals, like what you'd find in a submarine or a military bunker, they're hermetically sealed, floor to ceiling. Nothing gets through. The Titanic's? Nope. The bulkheads, the walls between the compartments, they were open at the top. You can basically think of them as being designed like an ice cube tray. And this just perfectly illustrates the consequence of that design. Once the first few compartments filled with seawater, the sheer weight of it pulled the bow of the ship down. And as it tilted, the water did the only thing it could do. It just spilled right over the top of the bulkhead into the next compartment, and then the next one and the next one after that. The ship was literally pulling itself under, one compartment at a time. So, this design flaw led directly to the moment of truth. Right after the impact, Captain Smith and the ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, raced below deck to see how bad it was. And what they found wasn't chaos. It was a simple, terrifying equation. The iceberg hadn't torn some massive gash in the side like a lot of us believe. It was actually more subtle. It buckled the steel plates all along the hull, popping rivets and opening up seams to the sea. And water was just pouring into the first 5 compartments. In Boiler Room 6, the crew was already running from a jet of water 2 feet wide. 4. That was the magic number. The absolute maximum number of compartments the Titanic could have flooded and still stay afloat. But the iceberg had breached 5. So the crucial point is, with 5 compartments taking on water, that ice cube tray effect was now guaranteed to happen. The sinking wasn't just a possibility anymore. It was a mathematical certainty. I mean, can you imagine being Thomas Andrews in that moment? You're looking at your own blueprints, this masterpiece you designed, and you do the grim calculation. The man who created the ship had to pronounce its death sentence. And the conclusion was, in his own word, inescapable. The next couple of hours were this slow, agonizing descent, but that final hour? Well, that's when the laws of physics took over in the most catastrophic way you can imagine. By 2 a.m., the ship's tilt is just extreme. The bow is so heavy with water that the stern begins to lift high up into the air. On the deck, anything that isn't bolted down is just sliding into the freezing ocean. The end is coming, and it's coming fast. And then this happens. The stern of the ship rises so high that the enormous multi-ton propellers are lifted completely out of the Atlantic. This one image, it signaled an unbelievable and unimaginable amount of stress being placed right on the ship's midsection. So now, the ship's steel skeleton is being tested by forces it was never, ever meant to handle. You have to remember, in the freezing temperatures of the North Atlantic, even high-quality steel becomes brittle. It loses a lot of its elasticity. So instead of bending under this colossal strain, it was now ready to shatter, pushing the hull to its absolute breaking point. So the final, terrifying question wasn't if it would sink anymore. It was, how much more of this incredible punishment could the hull possibly take before the inevitable finally happened? At 2:18 a.m., it couldn't take any more. With a sound that survivors described as a roar of tearing metal, the immense stress just became too much. The hull snapped in two, the lights flickered one last time, and then darkness. Just 2 minutes later, at 2:20 a.m., the Titanic slipped beneath the waves. It began its long, 2.5-mile journey to the ocean floor, where it would remain a hidden, silent mystery for decades. Yeah, for 73 years, the ship was just lost to the world. It was a ghost story whispered among sailors. But when it was finally discovered back in 1985, it became a silent archive, a perfect time capsule of the exact moment hubris met nature. This disaster was so much more than a shipwreck. It was a psychological blow to an entire generation's faith in its own technology. It completely shattered the illusion that we, through our own genius, could conquer the forces of nature. The unsinkable ship proved that, well, nothing is truly invincible. And that kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? The Titanic was the absolute pinnacle of technology for its day, a symbol of guaranteed safety and progress. It just makes you wonder, what are the unsinkable ships of our time? What modern myths of invincibility do we still believe in today?